Hey everybody! So, guess what we're reading? The American Indian Myths and Legends. It is fantastic. We are on a story titled Why Mole Lives Underground from the Cherokee Tribe on page 305. A man was in love with a woman who disliked him and wanted nothing to do with him. He tried in every way to win her favor, but with no success. At last he grew discouraged and made himself sick thinking about it. Mole came along and finding the man so low in his mind, asked what the trouble was. Finding him so low in his mind. The animal's looking at him. The man told him the whole story, and when he had finished, Mole said, "I can help you. Not only will she like you, but she'll come to you of her own free will." That night, burrowing underground to the place where the girl was in bed asleep, Mole took out her heart. He came back by the same way and gave the heart to the discouraged lover, who couldn't see it even when it was in his hand. "There," said the Mole, "swallow it, and she will be so drawn to you that she has to come." The man swallowed the heart, and when the girl woke up, she somehow thought of him at once. She felt a strange desire to be with him, to go to him that minute. She couldn't understand it because she had always disliked him, but the feelings grew so strong that she was compelled to find the man and tell him that she loved him and wanted to be his wife. And so they were married. All the magicians who knew them both were surprised and wondered how it had come about. When they found that it was the work of Mole, whom they had always thought too insignificant to notice, they were jealous and threatened to kill him. That's why Mole hid under the ground and still doesn't dare to come up. Based on a tale reported by James Mooney in 1890s. That is clever! Because the moles go underground. They actually don't like to come out too much. So the magicians are the ones who are trying to get him because, they didn't have this magic, but they had, the mole itself was able to, do this little thing in the story. I love how they incorporated the behavior of the animal to just practical relationship problems that can happen and just unique marriage stories. That is super cute. He said swallow it, right? And she'll be drawn to you. That's interesting. So it actually gets digested by him and they come to love each other. In a fantasy story. It's not real. It's just something entertaining to tell. But it's still creative. Super creative. Okay, now this story is titled A Legend of Multnomah Falls from the Multnomah tribe. Many years ago, the head chief of the Multnomah people had a beautiful young daughter. She was especially dear to her father because he had lost all his sons in fighting, and he was now an old man. He chose her husband with great care, a young chief from his neighbors, the Clapstop people. To the wedding feast came many people from tribes along the lower Columbia and south of it. Okay, this chief, let's see what happens. All his sons died as warriors. Wow. The wedding feast was to last for several days. There were swimming races and canoe races on the river. You see, that's interesting. Religious celebrations around the world and throughout time have been interesting affairs. And even the minimalist ones where it's just a very small personal ceremony are also interesting. So even in their legends and lore, you do get an insight into how they view marriage. There would be bow and arrow contests, horse racing, dancing, and feasting. The whole crowd was merry, for both the maiden and the young warrior were loved by their people. But without warning, the happiness changed to sorrow. A sickness came over the village. Children and young people were the first victims. Then strong men became ill and died in one day. Well, that's a terrible disease. The wailing of women was heard throughout the Multnomah village and the camps of the guests. Wow, that's a lot of pain in the air. "The Great Spirit is angry with us," the people said to each other. The head chief called together his old men and his warriors for counsel and asked gravely, "What can we do to soften the Great Spirit's wrath?" Only silence followed his question. At last one old medicine man arose. "There is nothing we can do. If it is the will of the Great Spirit that we die, then we must meet our death like brave men." Sounds exactly like something in that position would say. The Multnomah have ever been a brave people. The other members of the council nodded in agreement, all except one, the oldest medicine man. He had not attended the wedding feast and games, but he had come in from the mountains when he was called by the chief. He rose and, leaning on his stick, spoke to the council. His voice was low and feeble. Okay, why though? "I am a very old man, my friends. I have lived a long, long time. Now you will know why. I will tell you a secret my father told me. He was a great medicine man of the Multnomah, many summers and many snows in the past." See how they measure time and seasons? "When he was an old man, he told me that when I become old, the Great Spirit would send a sickness upon our people. All would die, he said, unless a sacrifice was made to the Great Spirit. So even the Native Americans, have a sacrificial spirit. Some pure and innocent maiden of the tribe, the daughter of a chief, must willingly give her life for her people. Alone she must go to a high cliff above Big River and throw herself upon the rocks below. If she does this, the sickness will leave us at once." Then the old man said, "I have finished. My father's secret is told. Now I can die in peace." Look at that. Saying your last words and stuff. Not a word was spoken as the medicine man sat down. At last the chief lifted his head. "Let us call in all the maidens whose fathers or grandfathers have been headmen." Soon a dozen girls stood before him, among them his own loved daughter. The chief told them what the old medicine man had said. "I think his words are the words of truth," he added. Then he turned to his medicine men and his warriors. "Tell our people to meet death bravely. No maiden shall be asked to sacrifice herself. The meeting has ended." The sickness stayed in the village, and many more people died. The daughter of the head chief sometimes wondered if she should be the one to give her life to the Great Spirit. Wow, what a position to be put in. I wouldn't want to be the one to have to make that choice. But she loved the young warrior. She wanted to live. "I love keeping you going." A few days later she saw the sickness on the face of her lover. Now she knew what she must do. She cooled his hot face, cared for him tenderly, and left a bowl of water by his bedside. Then she slipped away alone, without a word to anyone. All night and all the next day she followed the trail to the great river. At sunset she reached the edge of a cliff overlooking the water. She stood there in silence for a few moments, looking at the jagged rocks far below. Then she turned her face towards the sky and lifted up her arms. She spoke aloud to the Great Spirit. Oh, I see. She's doing that. Okay. "You are angry with my people. Will you make the sickness pass away if I give you my life? Only love and peace and purity are in my heart. If you will accept me as a sacrifice for my people, let some token hang in the sky." Wow. It's almost like she's not... This sacrificial figure is very common in a lot of stories. "Let me know that my death will not be in vain, and that sickness will quickly pass." Just then she saw the moon coming up over the trees across the river. It was the token. She closed her eyes and jumped from the cliff. She actually did it. Oh my gosh. Next morning, all the people who had expected to die that day arose from their beds well and strong. They were full of joy. Once more there was laughter in the village, and in the camps of the guests. Suddenly someone asked, "What caused the sickness to pass away? Did one of the maidens..." Once more the chief called the daughters and granddaughters of the headman to come before him. This time one was missing. The young Klapstop warrior hurried along the trail which leads to Big River. Other people followed. On the rocks below the high cliff, they found the girl they all loved. There they buried her. Wow, that must have been hard for that guy. Imagine seeing that. Then the whole village you see it and you're like, what happened, man? Then her father prayed to the Great Spirit. Show us some token that my daughter's spirit has been welcomed into the land of the spirits. Almost at once they heard the sound of water above. All the people looked up to the cliff. A stream of water, silvery white, was coming over the edge of the rock. It broke into floating mist and then fell at their feet. The stream continued to flow down in a high and beautiful waterfall. For many summers, the white water has dropped from that cliff into the pool below. Sometimes in winter, the spirit of the brave and beautiful maiden comes back to see the waterfall. Dressed in white, she stands among the trees at one side of Multnomah Falls. There she looks upon the place where she made her great sacrifice, and thus saved her lover and her people from death. Reported by Ella Clark in 1953. See? Oh, that's female power. That's female power. Look at that. She had a different type of feminine strength, right? Beautiful.